My brother burst into our home, telling my boyfriend, "She's weak. Ditch her. I'll show you a real woman." My boyfriend tossed my stuff out, laughing. I ruined their lives. Today, my phone lit up with 21 missed calls and her frantic texts. "Please answer." But I'm long gone. Their betrayal fueled me. Now they regret it, but I'm building a new life. Okay, y'all, buckle up because this story is absolutely wild, and I'm still processing everything that went down. For real, this sounds like something straight out of a soap opera, but it's my actual life, and I can't even believe I'm typing this right now. So picture this. I'm sitting in my apartment last Tuesday around 7 p.m., just chilling on my old IKEA couch watching Netflix with my boyfriend Jake. We'd been together for about 8 months. Nothing too serious, but definitely comfortable, you know? Like, we had our little routines. He'd come over with Taco Bell on. Tuesdays, I'd make breakfast on Sunday mornings, that whole thing. Jake seemed like a solid dude at first. He drove this beat-up Honda Civic that barely started half the time, worked at Best Buy, and was always talking about saving up for a better car. Not exactly Prince Charming material, but he was sweet to me and made me laugh, so I figured why not see where it goes? Anyway, we're sitting there watching some random show when I hear this aggressive pounding on my door, like someone was trying to break it down. My heart immediately started racing because who pounds on doors like that at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday? Jake looked at me like, what the heck? And I honestly had no clue what was happening. I opened the door and there's my brother Marcus, looking absolutely unhinged. His face was all red, his hair was messy like he'd been running his hands through it, and he had this crazy look in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Marcus is my older brother by 3 years, and we'd always had a complicated relationship. He was the golden child growing up, star quarterback in high school, got a full ride to state, the whole 9 yards. I was always just his little sister, tagging along. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Marcus pushes past me into my apartment, doesn't even acknowledge me, and walks straight up to Jake, who's still sitting on the couch looking confused as anything. And I swear on my grandmother's grave, this is exactly what he said. "Dude, she's weak. Like, seriously weak. You need to ditch her right now and I'll show you what a real woman looks like." I'm standing there with my mouth hanging open like a fish, completely speechless. Jake looks between me and Marcus, and I can see something shifting in his expression. Like he's actually considering what my brother just said. Then Marcus pulls out his phone and starts showing Jake pictures. I couldn't see what they were from where I was standing, but Jake's eyes got all wide and he started nodding along with whatever garbage my brother was feeding him. "See what I mean?" Marcus is saying, all confident and smug. "This is what you could have instead of settling for mediocre." Y'all, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My own brother was basically telling my boyfriend to dump me to my face in my own apartment. The audacity was absolutely mind-blowing. But then Jake, this guy I'd been cooking breakfast for, this guy I'd been planning little weekend trips with, actually starts laughing. Not like nervous laughter, but genuine, mean laughter. "You know what, Marcus? You're absolutely right," Jake says, standing up from my couch like he owns the place. "I've been wasting my time here." And then he starts gathering up his stuff. His phone charger, his extra Nike hoodie that he always left on my chair, his stupid energy drinks from my fridge. Just casually packing up like our 8 months together meant absolutely nothing. I finally found my voice and said, "Jake, what are you doing? This is insane." He looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before, like I was something gross he'd stepped in. Marcus opened my eyes. I deserve better than this. Marcus is standing there grinning like he just won the lottery, pulling up more pictures on his phone. "Trust me, bro, you're going to thank me for this." Update. "Hey everyone, thanks for all the support so far. The comments are making me feel less crazy about this whole situation. I know some of you are wondering who Marcus was talking about when he mentioned a real woman. Well, you're not going to believe this next part. Should I tell you what I discovered about their little plan?" So Jake finishes packing his stuff, and as he's walking toward the door, he turns back to me and says, "Don't contact me. We're done here." Just like that. 8 months down the drain because my brother decided to play puppet master with my relationship. After they left together, they left together like they were best buddies, I just sat on my couch in complete shock. I kept thinking this had to be some kind of prank or misunderstanding, like maybe I'd wake up and it would all be a weird dream. But no, it was completely real. My brother had just convinced my boyfriend to dump me using some mysterious photos on his phone, and they both walked out of my life like I meant nothing. I spent the rest of that night crying and eating ice cream straight from the container. Ben and Jerry's Chunky Monkey because I'm basic like that, trying to figure out what just happened. I called my best friend Sarah and told her everything, and she was just as shocked as I was. "That's absolutely insane," she kept saying. "Who does that to their own sister?" The next few days were rough. I kept expecting Jake to text me, maybe apologize and say he realized how crazy the whole thing was, but nothing. Radio silence. It was like he'd never existed in my life. I was hurt, confused, and honestly pretty depressed about the whole thing. I started questioning everything about myself. Was I really that terrible? Was I actually weak like Marcus said? Were there things about me that made me unworthy of love? But then something interesting happened. About a week after the whole disaster, I ran into Jake's coworker from Best Buy at Target. This guy Kevin, who I'd met a few times when I'd stopped by Jake's work. "Hey, how's Jake doing?" Kevin asked me while we were both looking at phone cases. "We broke up," I said, trying to keep it simple. Kevin looked genuinely surprised. "Really? That's weird. He seemed really happy with you, always talking about how great you were and how he was thinking about moving in together soon." Moving in together? Jake had never mentioned anything like that to me. but apparently he'd been talking to his coworkers about getting more serious with our relationship right before my brother's little intervention. This made me start thinking, if Jake was happy and thinking about taking our relationship to the next level, why would he flip so completely based on one conversation with Marcus? What could Marcus have possibly shown him on that phone? I decided to do some detective work. I started by checking Marcus's social media, which I rarely looked at because we weren't particularly close. His Instagram was mostly just gym selfies and pictures of him at bars, nothing too interesting. But then I noticed something weird. There were all these recent photos with this woman I didn't recognize. She was blonde, looked maybe mid-20s, always dressed really fancy in these pictures. They were at nice restaurants, some kind of boat party, a bunch of places that definitely cost more money than Marcus usually spent. The weird part was that in every single photo, Marcus was tagged, but the woman wasn't. Like he was deliberately not identifying who she was. But she was clearly more than just a friend based on how close they were in all the pictures. I decided to reverse search one of the photos using Google Images, and boy did I hit the jackpot. Turns out this mystery woman was named Jessica, and she had her own Instagram account that was mostly private but had a few public photos. From what I could see, Jessica was married. Like seriously married. Her public photos showed her with some older guy at what looked like anniversary dinners and family gatherings. She had Mrs. Thompson in her bio and everything. So my brother Marcus was apparently having an affair with a married woman named Jessica Thompson, and somehow this connected to him sabotaging my relationship with Jake. But it gets even more interesting. I decided to dig a little deeper into Jessica's social media presence. Her husband looked familiar to me for some reason, so I clicked on his profile. Turns out Jessica's husband, David Thompson, was the regional manager for several Best Buy locations in our area, the same Best Buy where Jake worked. The pieces started falling into place. Marcus was having an affair with the wife of Jake's ultimate boss. Somehow Marcus had used this connection to manipulate Jake into breaking up with me. I couldn't prove exactly what had happened, but I had a pretty good theory. Marcus probably showed Jake those photos of him with Jessica and convinced him that he could hook Jake up with someone better through his connections. Maybe he promised Jake a promotion or better opportunities at work through Jessica's husband. Or maybe Marcus threatened Jake somehow, using the affair as leverage. Like, do what I say or I'll make sure your boss finds out about what his wife has been up to. Either way, Jake had been played just as much as I had. Not that this made me feel sorry for him. He still chose to humiliate me and throw away our relationship based on whatever scheme Marcus had cooked up. Update. Okay, so I've been getting lots of messages asking what I did with this information. Some of you are suggesting I should have confronted them directly. Others are saying I should have minded my own business. Well, let me tell you what. I actually did, and you can judge for yourselves whether it was right or wrong. Did I make the right choice in what came next? Armed with this information about Marcus and Jessica's affair, I had to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to confront Marcus directly and demand answers about why he'd sabotaged my relationship. Another part of me wanted to call Jake and tell him he'd been manipulated, but then I realized something important. Both Marcus and Jake had made choices that hurt me deeply. Marcus chose to betray his own sister, and Jake chose to throw away our relationship based on whatever scheme my brother had presented. Even if Jake had been manipulated or threatened, he still could have talked to me about it. He could have said, "Hey, your brother approached me with some weird situation, and I'm not sure what to do." Instead, he chose to humiliate me and cut me out of his life completely. So I decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting anyone directly, I was going to let the truth come out naturally while I focused on moving forward with my own life. First, I blocked both Marcus and Jake on all social media and changed my phone number. I didn't want either of them to be able to contact me while I figured out my next steps. Then I started working on myself. I'd been so focused on the drama and betrayal that I hadn't really processed how much the whole situation had affected my self-esteem. I started going to therapy, which was honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made. My therapist helped me understand that what Marcus and Jake did said nothing about my worth as a person and everything about their own character flaws. She helped me see that I deserved relationships built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and betrayal. I also started focusing on my career in a way I hadn't before. I'd been working as a graphic designer for a small marketing company, but I'd always dreamed of starting my own freelance business. The whole situation with Marcus and Jake gave me the push I needed to finally take that risk. I spent the next few months building up my client base, creating a professional website, and networking with other designers. It was scary at first, but also incredibly empowering to be taking control of my own future. Meanwhile, I occasionally heard updates about Marcus and Jake through mutual friends and social media, even though I wasn't directly following either of them. Apparently, Jake had been promoted to assistant manager at Best Buy shortly after our breakup, so my theory about Marcus using his connection to Jessica to benefit Jake was probably correct. But here's where things started getting interesting. About 3 months after the whole incident, I heard through Sarah that Marcus had been acting really stressed and paranoid lately. He'd been posting less on social media and seemed to be laying low in general. Then about a month after that, Sarah told me she'd heard some juicy gossip from her cousin, who worked in the same office building as David Thompson. Apparently, David had found out about his wife Jessica's affair and was filing for divorce. Not only that, but he was also filing a lawsuit against her for some kind of financial misconduct related to his business accounts. I didn't know all the details, but it sounded like Jessica had been using her access to David's business information to benefit herself somehow. Maybe she was feeding insider information to Marcus or using David's connections for her own gain. Whatever the case, David Thompson was not the kind of man you wanted to cross. He had money, connections, and apparently, a really good lawyer. Within a few weeks, the drama started affecting Jake's work situation. David Thompson started making changes to the management structure at his Best Buy locations, and Jake's promotion was suddenly reversed. He went back to being a regular sales associate, and word was that his hours were getting cut too. I found out about this through Kevin, Jake's former coworker, who I'd stayed in touch with. Kevin told me that Jake was panicking because he'd been counting on the promotion to afford a nicer apartment and had already signed a lease based on his expected higher salary. He keeps asking everyone if they know why Mr. Thompson suddenly doesn't like him, Kevin told me. But nobody wants to get involved in whatever's going on. Marcus was having his own problems. Apparently, Jessica had completely cut contact with him once her husband found out about the affair. Marcus had been bragging to his friends about his connection with this sophisticated older woman, and suddenly she was acting like she'd never met him. But the real drama was just getting started. David Thompson, it turned out, was not just Jessica's husband but also a pretty influential guy in the local business community. When he decided to go scorched earth on his wife's affair, he made sure that everyone in their social and professional circles knew exactly what had happened. This meant that Marcus, who had been planning to leverage his relationship with Jessica for networking and career opportunities, was now persona non grata in those same circles. People who might have been willing to do business with him before were now avoiding him like the plague. I heard from Sarah that Marcus had been turned down for several job opportunities that he'd been confident about. Apparently, word was getting around that he was untrustworthy and unprofessional. Jake was dealing with his own consequences. With his hours cut at Best Buy and his promotion reversed, he was struggling to make ends meet. He'd moved into a nicer apartment expecting to afford it with his management salary, and now he was stuck with rent he couldn't pay. Kevin told me that Jake had been asking around about getting a second job, but his reputation had taken a hit, too. When potential employers called Best Buy for references, they weren't getting glowing reviews anymore. Update. So this is where things get really wild, and I can barely believe I'm typing this. After months of silence, both Marcus and Jake have been desperately trying to contact me. My phone has been blowing up with calls and texts from numbers I don't recognize, and I found out they're both in some serious trouble. But here's the thing. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. Should I even bother listening to what they have to say? By this point, it had been about 6 months since the whole incident. I was doing really well. My freelance design business was taking off, I was in a much better headspace thanks to therapy, and I'd even started dating someone new. His name is Alex, and he's the complete opposite of Jake in all the best ways. Alex is a teacher, incredibly kind and patient, and he actually values communication and honesty in relationships. We met at a coffee shop where I was working on a client project, and he struck up a conversation about the design software I was using. Alex knew the whole story about what had happened with Marcus and Jake, and he was nothing but supportive about my decision to cut them out of my life completely. You don't owe either of them anything, he always said. Focus on building the life you want. And that's exactly what I was doing. My business was growing, I had several regular clients, and I was even considering renting a small office space. I'd moved to a nicer apartment in a different part of town, far away from all the memories of my old life. Then one Tuesday evening, exactly 6 months after that awful night when everything went down, my phone started ringing nonstop. I'd changed my number, but somehow people were still getting through. The first call was from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then another call from a different number. Then text messages started coming in from various numbers. Please call me back, it's urgent. I know you changed your number, but I really need to talk to you. Something terrible has happened. I blocked each number as they came in, but they kept finding new ways to contact me. Finally, I got a text that made me pay attention. It's Marcus. Jessica's husband is pressing charges. Jake lost his job. We both screwed up and need help, please. I stared at that text for a long time. Part of me was curious about what kind of trouble they'd gotten themselves into, but a bigger part of me realized that whatever was happening, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd spent 6 months rebuilding my life, and I wasn't about to let their drama pull me back into that toxic situation. So I blocked that number too, and went back to editing photos for a client. But the calls and texts kept coming. Different numbers, different approaches, but always the same desperate energy. Through mutual friends, I started piecing together what was actually happening. Apparently, David Thompson's investigation into his wife's affair had uncovered a lot more than just infidelity. Jessica had been using her access to his business accounts and connections to run some kind of side scheme. She'd been promising people business opportunities and taking money from them, using David's reputation to make herself seem legitimate. Marcus had been one of Jessica's victims, but he'd also been helping her find other people to scam. He'd convinced several of his friends to invest money in fake business opportunities that Jessica was promoting. When David found out about this, he didn't just file for divorce. He also reported Jessica to the police for fraud and filed a civil lawsuit against everyone involved in her scheme, including Marcus. Jake's involvement was more indirect, but he was still in trouble. Apparently, he'd been helping Jessica and Marcus by providing inside information about Best Buy's operations and customer base. He thought he was just helping his connection with business networking, but he was actually participating in corporate espionage. When David Thompson found out that one of his employees had been leaking company information to his wife's affair partner, Jake was fired immediately. Not just fired, but fired with cause, which meant he couldn't collect unemployment benefits. But it got worse. Best Buy was considering filing their own charges against Jake for breach of confidentiality and corporate espionage. Even if they didn't press charges, his termination for cause was going to make it nearly impossible for him to find work in retail or customer service. Marcus was facing potential jail time for his involvement in Jessica's fraud scheme. Several people had lost money based on his recommendations, and they were all looking to hold him accountable. Jessica herself had disappeared. She'd apparently taken whatever money she'd collected from her various schemes and left town before the police could arrest her. This left Marcus and Jake holding the bag for all of her crimes. So when they were desperately trying to contact me, it was because they were both facing serious legal and financial consequences for their choices. They probably thought I would feel sorry for them or want to help somehow. But here's the thing, I didn't feel sorry for them at all. Every single consequence they were facing was the direct result of their own decisions to betray me and get involved in Jessica's schemes. Marcus chose to sabotage his own sister's relationship for his own selfish gain. Jake chose to throw away our relationship and participate in shady business dealings. Neither of them had shown any concern for how their actions would affect me. Now they were in trouble and expected me to care? Expected me to drop everything and come running to help them? The audacity was just as shocking as it had been 6 months earlier. I talked to Alex about the situation, and he agreed that I didn't owe either of them anything. "You've built a great life for yourself," he said. "Don't let their chaos drag you backward." My therapist said something similar. She reminded me that people who truly care about you don't manipulate and betray you when it's convenient, then expect forgiveness when they need help. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to respond to their desperate attempts to contact me. I wasn't going to get involved in their legal troubles or financial problems. I was going to continue focusing on my own life and the people who actually deserved my time and energy. The calls and texts eventually stopped coming. I assume they either figured out other ways to handle their problems or they gave up on trying to get help from me. Either way, I was done with both of them forever. They'd made their choices and now they had to live with the consequences. 6 months later, I'm running a successful design business, living in a beautiful apartment with Alex, and planning for a future that doesn't include toxic people who only contact me when they need something. I heard through the grapevine that Marcus ended up pleading guilty to fraud charges and got probation plus community service. He had to pay back the money that people lost because of his involvement in Jessica's scheme. Jake eventually found work at a different retail store, but at a much lower position and salary than he'd had at Best Buy. His reputation in the industry was basically destroyed, and he was starting over from scratch. Jessica was eventually caught and arrested in another state where she'd been running similar scams. She was facing multiple felony charges and probably going to jail for a long time. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever imagined I could. My business is thriving, my relationship with Alex is healthy and supportive, and I've learned to value myself enough to cut toxic people out of my life without hesitation. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd responded to their desperate calls for help. Would I have gotten sucked back into their drama? Would I have compromised my own progress to help people who had never cared about hurting me? I'm glad I'll never know the answers to those questions. The life I've built without them is proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and moving forward. Marcus and Jake thought they could use me and discard me without consequences. They were wrong. While they were dealing with the fallout from their terrible decisions, I was building something beautiful and authentic, and that's exactly how it should be.